Hello, Steve White, TrekBoy89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, I'm doing this little video just so I don't have to put this at the start of my review of the first episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Because everyone who's watched my reviews knows my opinion. But, Season 2 just premiered, they did the first episode. It was, if you view it as just a generic science fiction show, it's quite good. If you view it as a rebooted Star Trek show, it's okay, a few little issues. If you try and view it as an actual Star Trek show, there's a couple of big issues. Basically, Star Trek was a vision that Gene Roddenberry had where the future was better than today. We had humans that had evolved, that behaved differently than us. We had the Federation, which was better than today's governments, and so forth. But apparently, people who owned the franchise, who owned the IP, were looking at it and thinking, okay, this is a niche show. How can we make it appeal to everyone? Well, let's just make it more relatable. So they changed things, like they made the people act like people from today, to be more like us. They made the Federation basically just like the governments of today, with all the same problems. And the issue with that is, of course, it takes away, the utopian future and the evolved humanity that we were given in Gene's vision in the original Star Trek, and that kind of takes away what made it special, what made Star Trek special. You could believe in that future and believe that tomorrow was going to be better and things were going to be better, we were going to evolve, we're going to improve. What this show says is, in the future, everything's going to be the same. We're going to have a government, basically, in Starfleet that, does all the same things we do today. It doesn't give people legal representation, it discriminates against minorities, it doesn't deal with immigrants well, it treats our enemies like less than human. All these problems that we have today with our governments, they've basically just put on Starfleet, when in real Star Trek, what they would have done was attributed those to alien races, and we would have been viewing that from the outside and be able to look at it objectively. So these are some of the problems with the show, and looking at Starfleet in this particular episode, sort of preparing potentially for war. And so that's one of the main issues. The other issue, of course, is the people just acting like regular people, like the situation with Babs, and the way that he responds to the Klingons with brutality and war crimes, essentially torturing a prisoner for information, which he's called on in the episode, and he just is like, I don't, he just keeps on going. It's a little racist. There is a stereotype against immigrants, particularly from some of the African continents who have had a lot of conflict, that they are damaged people who basically, even when they immigrate and come into our society, they have these issues, and as soon as they are tested within our society, they fall back against their issues and their training, their experience, and that's that racist stereotype of, bringing your problems with, to us. And I found it really oddly racist that they picked that character to be a brute and to violate, I don't know what you call the standards for how you treat other prisoners and other race and how you behave in times of war. It's something that they did with Cisco in Deep Space Nine, which again I thought was kind of racist, to have the black man doing this. Not the white man, not anyone else, but the black man. And his idea of, well, I'll sacrifice my morals and my integrity to save everyone else, and somehow that's admirable and that's honourable. So we see issues like that are, in these characters in this show, and we see it's just, there are parts of it that really are not Star Trek and really do not work. There are other parts that do, and the only excuse they can possibly have is, well, Starfleet wasn't quite there yet, and by the end of the series, we're going to be those people, and that's what they kept promising us. At the end of this season, at the end of this show, at the end of this century, or whatever, at the end of this decade, we are going to basically be who we see, who you saw in the original Star Trek, and what you're familiar with as Star Trek and the Federation and everything. And kind of goes the same for Spock. They have pulled on this small element of the cage where he was emotional just like anyone else, because they hadn't developed that character yet. That's all it was. And once they established that character as having no emotions, people in the Star Trek audience were smart enough to understand that. They didn't sort of ask, why was he emotional in the cage? Because we hadn't established that Vulcans didn't have emotion then. Because we were building the show, just like, the United Space Probe Agency was there instead of the Federation because they just hadn't created the Federation yet, or Starfleet yet. So we have these problems where Spock is now incredibly emotional. Now they did give him an excuse in this episode. It was a lame excuse that by unleashing his emotions to fight the Gorn, I think it was, in one of the final episodes of last season, that somehow he's just opened this floodgate and he can't control or stop his emotions, which is kind of ridiculous. It's like they're saying there's a physical thing you removed. It's just ridiculous. But it's the excuse for now him being emotional all the time about everything. And I'm not sure where the evolution of Spock is going to go, because any fan knows the evolution of Spock was he was raised in a Vulcan environment. He was raised to hide his humanity, his emotions, which of course people who also have to hide who they are, their identity, the LGBTQ plus community, anyone else who had to hide who they were to avoid discrimination could relate to that character. And they've basically just thrown that away, because in the original series he had to hide that he was emotions. He felt that he had to, and it took him a long time to accept his emotions and be comfortable to be half human. It took his whole life. It was Star Trek 6 before he really had made his peace with that. So what is this story for this Spock? Because this is not the same Spock. Is he just going to embrace his emotions, then become ashamed of that for no reason, for some reason? Why would Starfleet and his members of Starfleet make him feel ashamed of his emotions and his humanity? Why would he go backwards and then repress that, which is how we see him at the start of the original series? None of it really makes any sense, unless you just say it's a reboot, so he's got a totally different journey from the other Spock. That could be possible, but of course they insist it's canon, in which case it doesn't work. So here's just my little why Star Trek Strange New Worlds doesn't work as Star Trek, because the annoying thing is I can enjoy it as just a show on its own. I mean, those moments come up and I'm like, this is not Star Trek, this is not Starfleet, this is not Spock, but the characters do work, the actors are good. It's just they just deliberately abandon these elements of Star Trek that make Star Trek specifically Star Trek, and it undermines the show, and it makes it hard to enjoy if you're accustomed to those. If you've never watched Star Trek, if you didn't like Star Trek because you thought it was some silly hokey 60s show or something like that, you're not going to notice or care. So there's a lot of new fans who never really fans of the original Star Trek who don't know and don't care. But we do. People who grew up wanting to live in that universe, who looked at that universe Gene Roddenberry created, that future Gene Roddenberry created, and you wanted to believe that was going to be our future and wanted to be in that. You would spend a lot of money and time to research and buy merchandise and things to, prolong that experience and just stay in that universe. And that was one of the joys of Star Trek. It was this universe that had so many layers and levels and was consistent, and you could buy fictional manuals and things, and have the expanded universe and the novels and everything to sort of immerse yourself in that universe and stay immersed in that universe between series or seasons or movies. But now, if you're a Star Trek fan and you loved that, it's not there anymore. There's nothing to immerse yourself in. It's like, well, it's just like every day. It's just like everyday life. Today, it's just a matter of they have more technology and bigger guns, and that's sort of the only thing this show really offers to people. Is in the future we'll have better technology and people will at least aspire to be better like they were in Star Trek, but they're not actually there yet. So it's disappointing, because Discovery had all those issues, and when they were setting up this show, they could have just left all that and did their own thing, not just story-wise, with the ship going somewhere else and being somewhere else and not being on the same ship, but just having their own, internal world. They could have done that, and that's what I thought they were going to do. And when they do just deal with new, strange new worlds and new civilizations, it's fairly good. But as soon as they get into the Federation and Starfleet and just anything like that, they show that they are contradicting and abandoning what made Star Trek great, and what makes Star Trek canon consistent and work and believable. Because you can't really immerse yourself in a universe that doesn't make sense, that doesn't work. It pulls you out. It stops you from really engaging in it and believing in it. So yeah, I'm nearly up to 10 minutes. I'm going to stop. But I knew if I tried to do a review of the episode, I would have to talk about all this, and there's no way I could do it in like 5 minutes. So I thought I'm just going to do a separate video about why Strange New Worlds doesn't work as Star Trek, why it sort of failed in so much as it had such a great promise. And it's still a great show in some ways. I do enjoy it, the visuals of the Enterprise and the other ship fighting in like the red crystal. Was it an actual ring around the planet, or was it just a cloud of asteroids? I don't know, but it was beautiful, and parts of the episode were great. But then you have these basic elements that just don't work and just don't fit and are not consistent. And if you're a Star Trek fan, you can't really ignore that, and it's just frustrating because they didn't have to do that. They could have evolved the Federation, and that they could have moved forward instead of just staying in the past with Discovery, which is what they keep doing. They're sort of, doubling down on that. But I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Thanks. Bye.